Today's guest is Mayur Gupta, the CMO of Kraken, and former growth and marketing leader at iconic companies like Spotify, Gannett, and Kimberley Clark. He's also been recognized as a top 50 CMO by Forbes. Here's what Mayur and I talked about. Switching careers from engineering to marketing, the 4 eras of marketing and his take on the next era, and how to balance brand and performance marketing, including a behind the scenes of the F1 sponsorship deal that Kraken just cracked. So let's get into it. All right, so let's jump straight into it, Mayur. I'm super excited about this conversation, and in large part because I think you have done a great job of practicing what you preach, and I'm excited about sort of getting into all of it. So you've now led marketing and growth teams at companies like Kraken, Gannett, USA Today, Spotify, Kimberley Clark, like lots of different industries. And at the same time, you're also, I see all the time amazing posts from you on LinkedIn. So the fun question, why do you prioritize LinkedIn and how do you make time for it?
Yeah, I honestly feel I wish I was able to do a little bit more than what I used to, especially in the last 18 months. I've slowed down a bit, not been that consistent. But to be honest, I think whether that's LinkedIn or Twitter, I index a little bit more on LinkedIn because that's just where it started. And I have found it hard to replicate and manage yourself on 2 different brands that have very different type of audiences, very different tone, best practices, etc. So I've tried to do that, but I focus on LinkedIn. But for me, the platforms have been a fantastic give and take, even though I have selfishly taken a lot more from the platform and the incredible set of thought leaders you find on a platform like that and the content they share. And I've done my small part of sharing. But besides that, I think platforms like this are a brilliant academia that teach you what brand building really is. And it's insane how much you learn when you're trying to build your own brand, how much you learn about building a brand that you work for. The algorithms will set you right. They will tell you if you're not consistent. They will tell you if you're not being authentic. They will tell you if you don't understand your audience. They teach you how to look at the data to see what works. So it's pretty incredible when you actually use these platforms to truly learn the first principles and how all that theory that we talk about comes to life. So
I love that.
It's pretty incredible.
That's amazing. And so what you're really saying, and I hope that every marketing leader is kind of taking a page from this book, that because you're investing personally, you have a pulse on exactly what's happening in these platforms. And that helps you be a better marketing leader because your marketing teams are having to do the same thing, right? Whether it's organic or it's paid, you're trying to figure out how to best leverage those platforms to get the message out in a way that's going to resonate. So I love that. That's great. One of the things that I noticed, Mayur, similar to my own background, I noticed you went from engineering to marketing. And I'm curious, was that a conscious choice? Was it a happy accident? How did you go down this rabbit hole of marketing over the course of your career?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I wish I was smart enough to have made those conscious choices, but it's been a wonderful journey of some fortunate accidental decisions that, to be honest, in the first few years were made for me by somebody, and I just happened to be in the right place at the right time, perhaps being mentored by some incredible people. So, a bit of background, grew up in India, did my master's in computer science in the late 90s. And back then, at least for most kids, it was either cricket, which was a wild dream, or you got into computer science, which was a safer bet. And
Yep.
I didn't have enough courage to follow my dream to play for the country. So fell back on something which was more safe and started my career as an engineer, wrote code for the first few years, all kinds of things, and which is very, very normal growing up in India. Came to the US I used to work at Sapient, which is now part of Publicis, came to the US in 2002, was a Unix admin, was a DBA, actually, as first time got really deep into Oracle. I think it was Oracle 9i or something like that, and things
Nice.
like that. But the first pivot for me, Pana, really came in 2006 when we acquired an ad tech product, and one of my mentors asked me to be a product leader. So I evolved from pure engineering to building products for marketing and advertising. And I would literally go back to my hotel because I was traveling for the job, go back to my hotel and open Wikipedia because that is the only place I could find marketing for dummies and really understand what even an advertiser meant, what was a publisher. Because we were building products, so my journey in marketing started from a very technology side. We were building ad servers, search bid management system. I wrote some code in some of the modules as well. Then people said, you know what, just give up on writing code. Anyway, so that's how I got into the world of marketing and advertising. And the second pivot in my career came when, after 12 plus years, I finally left Sapient to join Kimberley Clark, and then 4 years after that, Spotify. So I went from the pure tech consulting and product side to on the brand side, which totally shifted my perspective. In many ways, it kind of helped me have a point of view.
Right.
It changed my perspective about technology, where when you're on the other side, you are actually trained to sell complexity. That's why there's no conversation that gets done in 2 minutes. Whereas when you go on the other side of the fence, you literally have 60 seconds to tell somebody what is the problem and how you're going to solve it, right? Where technology now becomes the enabler, and you are obsessed with changing human habits and behavior that will help you drive business growth. So it was a dramatic shift. And since then, maybe I can say in the last 8 or 10 years, I have made some conscious choices. But getting here from engineering to marketing has been a fantastic journey. And there was an interesting time where I was asking myself, should I go down the path of the product hierarchy? Should I go down the path of being a CTO someday, even though I don't think I would have qualified to get there? And then I felt that even though I wasn't understanding marketing at all, but I felt it all kind of sounded much like being a good human. This is what my parents taught me. Hey, don't lie. Show up when you said you will show up, and deliver on your promise. Be honest, be authentic, have courage, stand up for stuff, have values, which is what basic marketing is. So while I never studied the 4 A's, the 4 P's or C's and whatever, I do feel good marketing is being a good human.
What a great definition of marketing. I like that. And I think everything that you said, right, from authenticity to showing up to having courage to never lying, if you follow those traits, you make a good marketer. I agree. Okay, so on that note, Mayur, one of the things that you have recently talked about from your experience about brand and performance, you said this thing about the the most important piece of feedback for a CEO from a CMO's perspective is that distribution or audience building takes longer than you think, but it also compounds faster. So, how do you personally have that conversation with the rest of the C-suite, CEO, or anybody else? Like, do you have any practical tips on how to have that conversation?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I've been fortunate enough to work with some incredible leaders. So, both Jesse and Dave. Jesse was a founder and ex-CEO, and he's now the chairman of the board at Kraken. Absolute believer in the power of brand. And Dave, who's our CEO now, absolutely believes in the power of the marketing engine. And they are incredible supporters. That's why we are able to do a lot of exciting things here at Kraken. But in general, I think more broadly, I feel the biggest dichotomy that marketing has, Pranav, today is this struggle that you absolutely want all marketing to be measurable because it's all about proving incrementality, especially in this current era of marketing. But at the same time, if all your marketing is measurable, then you're not doing something right, because great marketing is serendipitous. It's irrational. The challenge is, how do you balance it? How do you balance the irrationality with marketing that is absolutely impactful and measurable and attributable? And that's the journey that we are all in. Now, when I talk to my peers or you talk to founders, I do talk to a lot of them or CEOs when you are part of a board. The one thing I always say is it's not a silver bullet. The business model dictates the complexity of marketing and the ability to prove marketing's effectiveness. If you're a non-direct to consumer business, let's say the more traditional CPG model, you're not struggling with these challenges because marketing is primarily the only growth engine that you have, right?
Right.
And there is nothing more compelling and powerful than telling your story in the most creative, honest way and building that brand, the halo effect. People see it, they get influenced, they come to the shelf and they buy it, right? Back in the day, and I know we will probably talk about how marketing has evolved in the last 50 years, but back in the day, this was the only model. But with a lot of direct to consumer coming in the last 20 years, then a lot of tech-led and product-led companies, the equation totally changes. Mm-hmm. And it gets amplified if you, as a marketing function or a marketing leader, are parachuting yourself in the second phase of growth. Because if you think about it, when did Google start marketing? When did Spotify start marketing? When did Kraken start marketing? Not on day one, not on year one. Yeah. They started marketing when they were already $1 billion plus in revenue, because that early growth happened on the backing of a fantastic product, network effects, a great flywheel, right? So you are coming in the second phase of growth to now build a marketing engine to create new demand. And as a leader, you already have the monkey on your back, right? You have to prove, hey, that you are now going to have incremental growth that would not have happened in the absence of marketing. So the practical tips that I have learned through a lot of mistakes and a lot of failures when I did not try to do that is, first and foremost, if you are being parachuted or you're parachuting yourself in a tech-led or a product-led company, which is not a traditional CPG, because that's a very different playbook. But most of the struggles you will hear are mostly in this type of an environment. My three most critical elements of the playbook are: one, as a marketeer, you don't love your brand before you love your product. And you don't love your marketing before you obsess and love your data. So whatever 30, 60, 90 framework you may have, start there. Don't become the custodian of the brand. Don't become the custodian of this tone and personality and brand foundation, etc. That will happen. But if we haven't figured out, if we haven't become product marketeers before we become brand marketeers or growth marketers, then we're going to miss the boat. We're going to drift ourselves onto an island, which happens in 9 or 10 cases. So that's the first lesson I've learned, that you got to champion the data. You need to know where you are, what the baselines are. And then you become obsessed with proving the incrementality of your efforts, of marketing. And that's where now, you get creative. I absolutely feel magic happens when your data team, your analysts, your researchers, they absorb creativity, because measuring brand needs creative thinking from a data standpoint. And then when your creative thinkers or your creative leaders, your creative strategists, they absorb data, that's when the magic really happens. But at Kraken, there are some fun facts that, despite being an absolute tech-led, product-led organization, of course, you can imagine a leading brand in crypto can't be anything else. Yeah. We are investing more on brand than performance. We are scaling performance too, but at an aggregate, our spend on brand is much higher, because we absolutely believe, and we are proving that with data, that the flywheel that a brand creates helps you soften the ground and create new demand, which is very important for a category like crypto, where 1 billion people don't wake up every day in the morning and say, I'm going to self-custody, or I'm going to buy and move over. So you have to first create new demand. And then you have to use science and great storytelling and technology to capture the demand with more performance and growth strategies and so on. And we're using, of course, different methods that I know you and the team are talking a lot about. How do you best use MMM? We use match market tests. We use brand lift studies. We use control group tests. So we have a framework to prove incrementality of brand. It's not black and white. I don't think it'll ever be black and white, but we do enough to show the signals short-term, mid-term, and long-term.
That's amazing. I think the thing that you said that really stood out to me in your statement was this, fall in love with the product and then fall in love with the data, and the rest will come. And then this idea of, even when you're building a brand, as you are with Kraken, um, having multiple ways of looking at the impact of that brand on short term and long term. And there are absolutely ways of doing it. It's not as like, 0 and 1, like you said. There's always a little bit of uncertainty involved, probabilities involved, but you have to get comfortable with that if you're in marketing, right? If you're looking for perfect precision, you're in the wrong function. So I love that. Okay, so you know one of the things that you've also talked about in the past is the idea of the four eras of marketing. And can you give us like a synopsis of what these four eras are, and why you think this new era is all about brand? And I know you're leaning into that, but I'm curious sort of what your formulation of these eras is.
Yeah, and this is obviously, I've often been given feedback that I have no clue, which is not wrong, because this is an engineer trying to tell the world what the eras of marketing really are. But this is how I looked at it when I was struggling, moving from on the agency and tech side to one of the top 100 Fortune 100s and one of the biggest brands like Kimberley Clark and Huggies and so on, to Spotify. I feel that era one is, when I was growing up and I had no clue about world and brands and so on, but at least you could see this is the 70s. And again, marketing is way older. So somebody got really serious with me when I shared this, that how could I say marketing only started in 70s? All I mean is, look, this is the world I saw in the 80s and 90s. So I'm referencing the era one being that, where it was all about the most creative and funny ad that you would see on screen or somewhere else. You were influenced and inspired by it. You went to the shelf and you bought it. So I call it the era of the Mad Men, the Midas touch, and cool creative work, and it worked. There was nothing else, right? We didn't have any option. So that worked pretty reasonably well until the 90s and late 90s and so on. That's era one. I call it the era of the brand. The second is, when e-com boom happened, and there was this infatuation of a lot of technology that was coming on. There was a proliferation of marketing tech, ad tech. We all felt, it was the world was getting divided into traditional marketing and digital marketing, until the smarter people realized that it was really marketing in a digital world. The world itself had changed. So that was the second era. I think it's a very chaotic and confusing era where we're trying to figure out what was happening through this massive revolution we were living. And then came the third era, which was the birth of the iPhone that totally changed our lives, but also something in parallel, which was Facebook crossing the 100 million mark. And they had the first growth theme, Chamath and so on. We've all read those stories. But that did something that moved the craft of marketing from pure brand and storytelling and pure purpose and soul, and very hard to very hard to measure, to something which now became absolutely binary, absolutely measurable, lower funnel redemption, same day gratification. Marketing became all about numbers, CAC, LTV, ARPU, conversion rates, CTRs. And gradually, it lost its soul. And you can't blame anybody, because it worked. You suddenly had this platform that gave you access to 1 billion people. You've paid a little bit, and people were coming and they were trying, because we had all these levers and weapons: give discounts, get some really creative ads, give 2 months of free service. And people said, why not? Right? And that was what I call the growth at all cost era. We all lived through that, and it worked. It worked fantastic for 13, 14 years, until two things happened. One, the cost of that media just went skyrocketing, because everybody was jumping on. Every brand was now direct to consumer, because the playbook just kept working, one brand after the other. Of course, cost of media goes up. Users now had a lot more choice. Loyalty wasn't an option anymore, because it was so easy to sign up with another food app, to sign up with another subscription business, which means that you're paying all this, so your CAC to ARPU, the unit economics stopped making sense. So that was one challenge that happened because the cost of everything was starting to go high, and the return or the lifetime value of a user kept diminishing because you now had so many choices. And the second thing that was the left hook on our faces was COVID, because COVID took marketing back to the basics. You now had to go back to understanding empathy when the world was falling apart. That you had to go back to, who am I? What is the purpose? What is the soul? Because the consumers could not see through, right? They were not influenced by the facade. And I feel that is what gave birth to this fourth era, where actually it's not the era of the brand. I think it's an era of the ands, because we've all realized that it is not either brand or performance or growth, but this is an era where we're all trying to figure out, how do we use brand as a growth driver? How do you use your growth strategy and your performance efforts as a brand builder? And how do you use these flywheels? And I think about these as three flywheels, building your brand or creating new demand, growing your user base or capturing that demand, or retaining that user base, or adding more value. So these are these three flywheels, and the magic of sustainable growth happens right at that intersection. That's the era that we are living in, where we are trying to prove the cross amplification of these flywheels to really drive sustainable growth.
That's a really good description of this, and your point about COVID is really interesting. I hadn't really thought about it from that perspective, that it really sort of shook people in a way that nothing else had in the last like maybe 15, 20 years, right? There was all these like positive things about the adoption of mobile and social and all the tech that was happening, but COVID really sort of shook up consumer sentiment in a way that nothing else had. Um, that's interesting. Do you think that that has had a lasting effect on this idea of like, how do you really break through to consumers, or do you think like it'll be back to normal and there will be a new era, obviously, as sort of the world changes? I'm asking you to play prediction here, but I'm curious what you think about the next 5 years.
Yeah, I think of course there's a lot that's happened in the last 24 months or so. AI plays a key role, and it's inevitable the role and impact it'll have in every craft, not just marketing. But I think one thing is certain in the post-COVID era, that the world that was infatuated, the world of the VCs, the venture capitalists, the world of the founder ecosystem, I think everyone has realized that the growth at all cost, lower funnel performance obsessed world of marketing and advertising is over.
Right.
I think we've all seen the fact that it works. It may still work, but that the runway is short. So
Yeah.
if you don't have the flywheel that is creating new demand for your business or your category, the moment you capture the demand that already exists, you are facing the wall, and it's very hard to create new demand at that point. So
Right.
I think the playbook has already evolved. I'm seeing that across the board. I see so many VCs now bringing leaders who truly understand brand as a differentiator. And I think that will stay. The challenge is, the ball is now in marketing's and marketeers' courts. We have got the chance now. So no one is questioning that, okay, you're investing on brand, but we don't have an infinite rope either, which means that the ball is in our court to now prove that, yes, see, you got the money. You said we're trusting you now. Show me that when you invest in brand building and you have this soulful, purpose-driven brand that is actually driving downstream impact. It is helping you, bringing more efficiency to your performance. It is driving stronger retention, because the users aren't just coming for the utility, or for the lower price. They're actually coming for a deeper connection as well that they have with your brand. So we have that responsibility now to prove that incrementality, and which is going to help survive, the power of brand in this craft of marketing.
Yeah, that's a very good point, and maybe also a nice segue into my next set of questions. I noticed that, so I'm definitely an F1 fan. I don't get enough time to watch all of the races, but it's taken over the American sort of landscape as well over the last few years with all the Netflix documentaries and what have you. And you all recently chose to sponsor an F1 team. Can you talk about how that decision even gets made? I think our audience would love to sort of understand. And how do you then sort of tie those type of investments to the impact in the business? Like, give us some guidance on how to even think about this.
Yeah, in many cases, we have a very interesting and a fortunate scenario at Kraken. We are one of the world's largest crypto exchanges, um, and massively inherently global. So we're not just US based. In fact, Europe's is our biggest region and so on. But enterprise global scale marketing did not exist at Kraken up until 2.5 years back. We didn't have to. We grew on the backing of a fantastic product, a incredibly strong and well-respected founding team. Being one of the earliest players, we've been around for 13 years, which could be 130
Nice.
years in another category when it
Right.
comes to crypto. And we are still here fighting, growing very rapidly. So marketing at that scale only started 2.5, 3 years back. So when we did our F1 partnership with Williams Racing at a time when nobody was doing any partnership, it was almost a taboo because market had totally collapsed. And
Mhm.
everybody was talking about all the kinds of partnerships crypto brands had done prior to that. And Kraken was never in that race because we were absolutely focused on just building great products. But we felt that last year, when we were going through this bear run, that was the right time for a brand like Kraken to show up, to now educate the world on the true substance of crypto, and not just the superficiality, not just the volatility, but what this movement truly means. How does it really impact people's lives? So then that's when we entered into this partnership, which was very weird because it was a dry 3 or 4 quarters when there was nothing being signed.
Mhm.
How a decision like that gets made, I think we challenge ourselves to balance the serendipity with a lot of analytical data. So we obviously with Williams Racing in this example, we felt a lot of synergy. Two legacy brands in our own respective areas, two
Right.
brands that were challenging the status quo. Williams Racing is, they are redefining. They are the only team on the grid that only focuses on racing. They don't have another business model, and they are the
Mhm.
second most successful team in the history of Formula One. Of course, they are in the rebuild phase. So, but they're obsessed with innovation. They're obsessed with speed. They're obsessed with technology. Everything that Kraken cares about. Now,
Mm.
you know, the leadership team at Kraken were absolute believers in the mission, and we felt that this was a great opportunity to now start to lay this foundation to drive our mission to scale global adoption of crypto. So it made all the sense for us. More importantly, what we do to measure the incrementality, because these are not small spending line items. So we've done a bunch of things. Our focus has been on these partnerships to not just slap the Kraken logo on all the real estate you get, but more importantly, use the platform to bring your mission to life. So we've done a lot of incredible things that I feel very proud of. So we were the first brand to actually use the rear wing of Williams Racing car in Austin last year. And we did this NFT contest where we selected 6 different artists, 6 different creators, and we crowdsourced this. And we had their NFT collections on the rear wing. That was the first
Very
time
cool.
I think anybody brought crypto and NFTs at the global scale like that. In our first race, we actually took the Bitcoin white paper as an ordinal and put that on the nose. So our idea has been, how do we bring the mission of crypto to life, bring it closer to people? We've been executing these fan zones before every race or almost every race with Williams Racing, where thousands of fans come, and we use blockchain and crypto to create an experience to give them incentives that they otherwise would not be able to get, and also use that opportunity to educate them about the true substance of crypto. So we measure that using all these different strategies. We measure the impact on our brand awareness. We measure some tangible downfall and impact. So our fan zones, you can actually download a grid pass, which is an NFT. And once you have access to it in your wallet, you can actually get additional access. But then we also measure what percentage of those users are actually navigating to Kraken's core portfolio and using. So it's a combination of short-term KPI and impact. It's a combination of real impact to our user base and revenue. And then we also have a whole institutional and B2B hospitality side, which is a massive, massive play for us as well.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense, and really holistic ways of thinking about how to maximize the opportunity that such a known brand in F1 has. So that's pretty cool. Um, Very tactical question. Are you also able to then leverage some of the brand partnerships in other channels, right? So do you then leverage the relationship in, I'm just making this up, right, in ads, or in the way that it shows up within the core app for Kraken? Like, I'm curious if that's sort of something that you all have played around with.
Huge. That's a huge part. So we spend a lot of time with the team. We spend a lot of time with Alex and Logan, who are the drivers. They are, I think they've been with us on the journey to elevate their own crypto depth. And we produced a lot of content last year. In fact, we are about to launch something at the end of this month and early next month. So I'm super pumped and excited about the work that the team has put together with both Alex and Logan. Again, not just to talk about F1, but to talk about the intersection of F1 and how we can use that to inspire people to learn more about crypto. So it's still on mission. It is still absolutely committed to drive global adoption of this brilliant movement to bring financial inclusion, but using ambassadors, using voices that people trust. Right. And yeah, so super excited about all of that. And there's a lot more on the hopper for through the rest of the year.
That's great. And, I had initially thought about asking you this question at the end, but I think it's timely. When we talk about crypto, and I've, played around personally a little bit, but very little, and mostly just on Bitcoin. So I'm curious, the technology has survived all the hypes and, bear markets and what have you. And so all, you all have survived that, the last 13 years. How do you communicate the vision for crypto and for Kraken to an end consumer like myself? Or even, if I were to talk to my wife about it, what would I say about what is the purpose and the mission that this technology has for the broader good of the world?
Yes, I'm going to do my best to respond to that in 90 seconds. But I have a funny way of responding to my friends when they ask, is this here? Is it all done? Is it over? Why do I believe this is a movement that is going to shape the next 100 years for us and our kids and the next generations? And then I have a slightly more substantial way. So maybe I will break the 90-second rule here.
Please do.
The funny way, the funny lighthearted way, but I mean it, is if there was anything that could go wrong within our ecosystem of crypto, Web3, whatever you want to call it, it did go wrong in between 2022 and 2023. Everything that you can imagine. And all of that going wrong or decline also for the first time coincided with TradFi in the economy, markets, everything was going downward. We are still here. We are booming more than ever before. Bitcoin hit an all-time high, and I'm only using Bitcoin as a proxy. There's a lot more happening. Yep. There are more startups, there are more projects on chain that are coming. I'm starting to see examples of utility that will make sense to people like you and I, which you and I as in normal users. We were not born in crypto. We were not degens who got into crypto and building on chain in 2010, 11, 12, for example. And it's, everything is back on the rise, which means that we are here. And it's an incredible it's an incredible layer and movement, a layer of technology. What hasn't happened, Pranav, which is why I can absolutely understand and relate to why there is still a lot of questions and misunderstanding or a lack of understanding, is because, see, think about two movements like these that have happened in the last 20 years, at least when you and I have been in our conscious life. So first, I can imagine is an iPhone that absolutely changed the world forever.
Yep.
And second, at a lower scale, you can argue is something like an Uber, which as a simple app changed mobility everywhere in the world. And then, of course, there are a lot more products like that have come. But the first time you use an iPhone or the first time I used an Uber app, we never spoke about the technology, right? We may have dug into it a few weeks and months later, but you didn't have to. Why? Because the value of that innovation was so tangible to you. You experienced it and you felt it. You got your first cab through your phone and you didn't have to take your credit card out to pay. That was magical. You have this thing in your pocket. You could browse the web, you could make a phone call, and it was a lot more easier than we had ever seen anything before.
Yep.
In crypto, the first 10 years, it was all about technology. The value was hidden. Whereas global adoption happens when the value is visible and the technology is hidden. I very strongly believe this next era of crypto, this is where the value will become visible and the technology will get hidden. So one, that is the premise, first of all. That has been the impediment, but I also feel that is a gateway now to bring the next billion and the 2 billion people into this. The value has to become obvious and tangible in different aspects of life, not just in finance, but all other areas as well. And it is going to start to happen. It's already happening and so on. So that's one part. On the more intellectual part, the way I explain it is, one, don't believe anything, but just get into it. Read about it, educate yourself. How many people believed in e-commerce back in 97, 98, 99? How much of that experience was massively broken? And I'm much older than you are, so I don't know what was your first internet access experience, but growing up in India, I grew up on dial-ups for a very, very long time. It was a massively painful process. And I think we are going through those pains, the early pains of a massive movement and revolution. The question we have to ask ourselves is, does it have the promise? And is it making certain things better than where we are? They will never be perfect, but are they better than where we have been? And I still feel these are very nascent years for crypto. There's a lot more innovation, a lot more development, a lot more fragmentation that has to be stitched together. But the only way to think about the future is look at how similar things were in the past when they were in their early stages, when they were in their early years. But I'm personally very, very excited, very committed, inspired by the mission. I feel anybody who has the opportunity, these are still early years and days. If you get into it, you are going to be getting into the early days and early years of the internet boom. And if you're not, that's also totally fine, because you're going to be on the consumption end of this great movement as more and more things keep popping up and more value becomes tangible.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I remember dial-ups in 95, 96, sitting in my home in Delhi and going through that. I remember that very vividly. And I was recently listening to another podcast by the Acquired folks. I don't know if you've heard that podcast. And they were talking about Microsoft, right? The recent Microsoft episode, and how everyone was like, yeah, maybe 1 in 20 people in an office will have a PC, but like, you don't need anything more than that, right? Like that was the consensus in before the big PC boom. So I totally relate that it's still very, very, very early for this whole space. And I've been in fintech myself. I've spent time at companies like PayPal, and I know how hard it is to organize money movement across countries and apps. And I see a lot of potential in that aspect of just money movement, easier money movement throughout the globe. So there's clear sort of ways in which this can transform the world. But like you said, we're still very, very early. So amazing. Okay, last question for you, Mayur. So you were, I think, twice on the Forbes entrepreneurial CMO 50 list. That is not common. So I'm like super excited that you're even talking to me, given that you're on that list. But I'm actually curious, what do you attribute that to? Was it a specific campaign or strategy, or What do you think it takes to get on a list like that? I'm genuinely curious how that came about.
Um, First, I don't think it's all that. It is very gratifying, but I don't think it's all that um, unique. There are incredible leaders out there who have been recognized a gazillion times over because they're far more accomplished, they're far smarter, more creative, etc. Um, but of course, I'm more so for my journey. I feel very humbled, very grateful. I have no idea how, but
Okay.
what I can say is that none of this recognition would even come close without the teams that I'm surrounded with, the leaders that I work with. And, one of my earliest lessons learned in my career, um, through a lot of mistakes, was, when you grow up in a country like India, which we both come from, the similar part of the country, eh, when you are competing, for one spot, and you are one amongst 10,000, then you are always trained and taught to come first, right? You are,
Hmm.
when if you get a 90 out of 100 in school, at least back then, things have changed a
Yeah,
lot
yeah.
now. The first question is not, oh wow, that's wonderful. The first question, who else got more?
Yeah.
Because there's only one spot. So there's no room for someone coming. So that's how I was trained. So the first so many years of my career, for me, it was all about how do I be the first one to cross the line. But through a lot of mistakes and failures, I learned that leadership is not about coming first. Leadership is all about how many you can take along yourself. And it's not about being the person with the answer in the room. It is about being the person who has the ability to ask the right question. And which meant that I've always believed in bringing leaders on the team who are 10 times smarter than I am. And that is the team we now have at Kraken, which is just some incredible leaders, who bring all aspects of marketing and growth and data. And they are incredibly smarter than what I bring to the table. My job is purely do my best to remove barriers for them so that they can really fly and bring their A game. So whether it is, I don't know, I think it was last year, but it was a function of all of that now, or back when I was at Gannett, or Freshly, and so on. So that's been my playbook: is make my job easier, bring the most incredible leaders, and I guess get there and earn these rewards or awards.
I love it. You're being humble, but I also agree. There's a famous saying, right? If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with a team, right? Or something of that nature. I must have butchered it. What a wonderful note to bring it home. This was fantastic, Mayur. I think I personally learned a lot about how to think about brand and performance and build a high functioning team. This is fantastic. Thank you so much. What is one call to action for everybody listening? What would you want them to do if you had the opportunity to kind of give them a call to action?
Um, um, I'm also a Buddhist, and despite all the academic and intellectual dialogue we all can have, one thing I've learned is there is nothing more critical and important than finding joy and appreciation in whatever we do, even on the hardest days. So, uh, rest will all fall in place, but at the end of the day, if you're having fun and you're grateful for your successes and failures, I think life's a lot easier. Otherwise, there is never enough, right? It's a never-ending journey.
Well said. Wow, what a beautiful thought. The Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you, Mayur. I'm excited to have you again on the show in a few months, maybe, and we'll catch up on how things are evolving at Kraken. But thanks again for showing up.
Thank you, Pranav. Thanks for having me.
Well, there you go, folks. That was Mayur Gupta, the CMO of Kraken. Give him a follow on LinkedIn where he dishes out gems on the daily. We'll have many more fun and insightful conversations. So tune in again next week. See you then.